It's Debbie Potts. I'm back with a new podcast with Louise of Keto Gains. So if you are confused on what the athlete that's fit and active needs to eat, when to eat, why you're eating, how to train, how to perform your best in life and sports, let's catch up with Louise. Listen in.
Welcome to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you burn fat, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey guys, it's Debbie, and I just wanted to give you a quick little message from one of our sponsors, LMNT, Element. It's spelled LMNT, but pronounced Element. If you haven't heard about this, Element is a tasty electrolyte drink mix with everything you need and nothing you don't. That means there's a lot of salt with no sugar, and it's formulated to help anyone with their electrolyte needs and is perfectly suited for those doing a keto, low carb, or paleo diet. And I think this is great for athletes, especially in the summertime and when you're training in warmer climates. Element contains a science-backed electrolyte ratio of 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. None of the junk, no sugar, no coloring, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers. That's it. I like the unsweetened one because the other flavors do have a little stevia, but stevia doesn't do well in my body. So I prefer the unsweetened Element, and I like the packets because I can throw them in my bike bag when I go on a long bike ride or when traveling, and I can just dump a packet in my water, and it keeps me so much more hydrated. Because remember, we don't sweat out water, we sweat out minerals. So check it out. You've got a nice little gift from them if you use our discount code Drink Element. I'll put the link in the show notes. But using the code Low Carb Athlete, you get a free gift with purchase. You get a free Element sample pack with any order when you order with Low Carb Athlete on our special URL code. So support the podcast, support Element. It's backed by science, and we love what they're doing. So try it out.
Hey, it's Debbie, and I have Louise Villaseñor from Keto Gains back on the show. We talked a couple years ago, 3 years ago, about fasted exercise and how to get stronger and the Keto Gains pre-workout fuel. And also electrolytes, as he is a co-founder of Element with Rob Wolf. And so when I interviewed Louise, a few years ago, I also talked to Rob Wolf, and I kind of started down this rabbit hole of, are we fasting too much? Are we eating too little? Are we too focused on fat and not eating enough protein? Are we eating enough? And when is it appropriate to add in some strategic real food carbohydrates in and around your workout to improve performance? So I had Louise come back on the show today and just talk about what's new in his world and what are some changes he's made in his fueling strategies with his clients and his own performance program. I am finding that insulin, the role of insulin, sounds like insulin as cortisol is bad for you. It is not good or bad as cholesterol. They all have a role in our body. There's a purpose to everything, but anything we know that's too much can cause disruption, imbalance, dysfunction, and then anything too little can cause deficiencies, imbalances, right? Dysfunction. So I always call this the Goldilocks effect. How much do we need of this or that to create a positive effect? What is a positive dose? What is a magic potion? It depends, because you are different than myself. Men and women are different. Women are different than other women depending on their cycle and hormones and what phase of life they are in their hormone world of peri, post, menopause, premenopause. So there's so much we need to not just say everyone needs to feel this way. Everyone needs to eat this. Everyone needs to take these supplements. Everyone needs to do a 16-8 fasting window and do a 3-day water-only fast once a quarter. Let's personalize what you are doing to improve your performance in life for who you are today, but also taking in account who do you want to be when you are 70, 80, 90, 100 years old. And I've been talking about training your future self for a few years after I did this 30-day program with Dr. Benjamin Hardy, I think it is. You can get a free program on his website, How to Create Your Future Self. And it really changed my mindset on an athlete perspective of let's look at what we're doing this year, what races you're doing, A race, B race, C race. Let's plan out the year. But not just do that. We really need, especially as we get over 40, especially over 50, how we're going to live our best life in our second half of our life. And if you're just focused on your training and racing schedule this year, you may want to push pause, stop, and reset, and set some new goals. Recreating yourself now so you can create your best future self. You hopefully are wanting to be thriving when you are older. Recently, I was just on a cruise ship for a week, San Diego to Mexico, so my husband can spend time with his father, who's 90, and his girlfriend, who is 88 years old. We were on a Holland America cruise ship, and the ship was smaller and it focuses more activities around the older adult. So I actually felt like the youngest, most fit person on the ship. And it's pretty funny, after being on a Royal Caribbean cruise a few times for our low carb conference we have once a year in June. But this time it was a smaller ship, half the size of Royal Caribbean giant ships. And I really got to watch, as in all cruises, how people eat, the relationship with food. How do they move? How do they prioritize exercise even on a vacation? So it's interesting to look at our behaviors in the world, because I think we are, as athletes, more in a bubble. We're the, like I said, 1% on the cruise ship. We were the 1% who was getting up at 5:30 so we can be in the gym and watch the sunrise, working out, and prioritize movement throughout the day and not take an elevator. I just take the stairs, and how to figure out how to go watch the sunset in the evening, be outside and walk after I eat, and not eat the junk foods and sweets. Plus, I'm non-celiac gluten sensitive, so I choose to avoid anything with wheat and gluten because I'm focused on my future self. So this is just me rambling, side note, but just conversation with Luis talking about keto and carnivore and trends kind of going on right now in our low carb space. What I'm finding is that metabolic health is more about muscle health. And what we're doing as we age should be focused on improving our muscle health by doing resistance training, doing the correct type of cardiovascular training, if it's zone 2 and zone 5, or maybe it's more sprints for the woman, less zone 2 for the female athlete, more for the man. But prioritizing the strength training is really important as we age. Balance, stability work, core work, foundational work, movement patterns, really important. But also what we're eating. And the shift that I was trying to get Luis to talk about that I see, and it's obvious if you are in our world for, 10, 15 years, you can see all the pivots people keep making, course correction, because we were doing too much fasting as athletes. We are fit and active people that are listening to this podcast and are in this world as Mike Mutzel and Brad Kearns and Thomas DeLauer and even Mark Sisson. We were doing the nutrition plan that is designed for metabolically unhealthy people. So once you are metabolically flexible, eating a nutrient-dense whole foods diet is important, not focusing on keto, which I never like the word because it just seems trendy, but nutrient-dense whole food diet, that you're eating the right amount of healthy fats for you, but we forgot to focus on protein. So my focus is prioritizing protein as an aging athlete. So metabolic health, muscle health is not just how we're training and what we're doing to lift heavy weights each week, 2 to 4 times a week, but making sure we're eating and properly digesting, because a lot of us don't have enough stomach acid to break down protein properly into amino acids, that we need to have some digestive support. So you can listen to my 2-part series with Dr. Minkoff on that, as well as my nutritional therapy information I share. But I think we need to prioritize what we're eating, when, why, how, and then fueling strategies around our workouts to improve performance. So if you are struggling to get the desired results by doing all what you're doing now, you may want to look at, I'm not eating enough. I do Pinoy metabolic testing. A lot of people that are athletes aren't eating enough, or they're not even getting protein in because they're focused on too many carbs or too much fat. So we need to look at your macros, adjust it for you as a unique individual. We need to focus on hitting the protein goals, as research from Dr. Donald Layman and Dr. Gabrielle Lyon and oh my gosh, who's the other guy? Just went blank. But really figuring out our nutrition, starting with the protein goals, because I think with keto, people focus just on fat. Now, carnivore, people are just only eating protein, fatty meat, getting the fat protein from animal meat diet. I like to individualize it. I don't feel like eating a lot of vegetables right now, but maybe I'll have a Cobb salad. I don't like to be only eat this unless you have an autoimmune disorder or some really gut health issues. You need to low FODMAP diet or whatever. That's where we need to personalize it. Do food sensitivity tests. Do some gut zoomers so you find out, are you reactive to wheat? Are you having endotoxins in your body and leaky gut, and those toxins are leaking out? So we need to really test and not guess, ideally. But remember to focus on taking care of the whole you from the inside out to improve your performance in your races this year, as well as focusing on how you want to be living when you're 90 years old. Are you going to be taking the stairs on that cruise ship? Are you going to be in the gym with me at 6:30 in the morning, lifting weights and working on your strength, balance, mobility? And then are you going to be walking and able to do little 10, 20-second sprints? Are you reading the information that Dr. Peter Tia is sharing on his website, on his podcast, in his book? But we need to individualize that. It's not one size fits all. So what do you need to focus on? What are your priorities? Are going to be maybe a little different than for me or for your spouse or your training buddy. So those are thoughts for today. So let's go talk to Lewis and he'll share his thoughts. Enjoy. Let me know your comments. Send me a message. All right, guys, I am excited to podcast. I've taken a few weeks off with holiday travel and now it's a new year. And I reached out to Luis of Keto Gains a few months ago because we are all about improving the aging process, being fit and active, and improving metabolic health, which is really about muscle health. And who is a great person to talk to, who's been in the industry a long time talking about muscle health and keto, is Luis of Keto Gains. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for the invite, Debbie.
So what do you feel like is all these trends? We just you've been in the keto low carb space, and I don't know, how long have you been in it? 10 years or 15?
Actually doing keto for more than 24 years now. So basically started, I tend to say, on the 2000s. That's exactly when I started reading and dabbling on the protocol and then modifying it a bit. But actually, I just got a notification the other day that the Facebook group, one of the Facebook groups, is 8 years old, and I started on that 2 years earlier. So it's about 10 years now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how. We started this podcast. Used to be called Fit Fat Fast 10 years ago, 12 years ago now, and it's really funny just how I just laugh every day almost. How just watching everything ping pong back and forth, that it's just what's hot and then it just rotates. And now it's carnivore and lift heavy weights and do zone 2 training and sprint training. And so it's just always, it's just frustrating to me. It's not personalized. And we need to take that information we hear out there and know that, okay, what is it ideal protocols and things we should do for lifestyle, for longevity, if we're already fit and healthy. If we're metabolically unhealthy and obese and have insulin resistance, the guidelines out there might be a little different than, and the fasting, 3-day fasts are big. It's January, so what do you find is kind of changed and what is bothering you, or some pet peeves, or some like, this is awesome. What's going on in your world?
Frankly, like you were saying, it all sort of goes in circles, right? Yeah. And especially if I were to say the more things that I've changed in the last 10 years regarding me or regarding some of my clients is for first actually being very strict to macros. That would be one of the first things that I change a lot. Basically, right now I'm in a place that I started a little bit around COVID, that I don't count macros anymore, right? Myself. On certain clients, I do suggest to count at least for a while, just to get aware which the portions of foods and what they should be eating versus what they actually eat. Mm-hmm. But generally speaking, like you were saying on the other topics about fasting and carnivore or keto or whatever, I've been a little bit less strict in what anybody wants to do. But I do explain, and I became more of a teacher rather than an actual trainer or a coach, in the sense that the first 2 sessions that I have usually with every client are basically teaching them a little bit about nutrition and metabolism in a very laid back fashion to make them understand.
I just pulled out my headset.
Okay.
I was trying to move. Okay, so sorry, you teach people about metabolism, and what was the rest?
Yeah, metabolism and why certain foods make us eat more, and how we can, in a way, I don't like to say hacking as in biohacking and all that stuff, that usually sounds a little bit cringy in the sense that people think it's magical. But no, the response and the actual reason why we are overweight is very simple. We are eating a lot of food that is not good for us, that actually make us eat more. If we become sort of a rebel in the sense that we stop eating a lot of processed foods and go back to meat and eggs and the side salad, you're likely going to be satisfied. And yeah, at the beginning, there's a lot of people that rebel a little bit like a child tantrum because they don't know any better, right? But if you teach them and help them see and help them try this approach, they realize that first, they are going to be more energized. It's funny, but you're eating less and you're more energized. You're not tired all day long, right? Then you have more mental clarity. And then the magical thing that they usually find out is they aren't hungry. And then they realize that there are a few types of hunger. Not all hunger is equal. And they understand that, okay, what I'm perceiving or why I'm usually eating is because I'm anxious. So it's more of an emotional hunger. I'm not really hungry, right? And then teaching them classic tricks on how to very much change your environment. Because a lot of people are very well-intentioned and with lots of motivation, let's say at this time of the year where they want to become healthier, start moving more, doing lots of exercise. But then they find out that willpower only takes you so far, right? If you want to diet and everything, but everybody in your house is on the unhealthy side. You have snacks and Cheerios and cookies all over the place, and you're seeing them every time you go into the kitchen. It's going to be as if you were swimming against the current and very difficult for you to actually last more than a week or two. If your workplace is also in the same vein, and so on and so forth, and most people aren't really strong enough, and they don't even know how to say no thank you to certain situations, then it becomes very difficult, right? Mm-hmm. So instead of actually also teaching them about nutrition, I try to teach them about all of these, in a way, psychological resilience tricks to learn to say no and go against very much what everybody else is doing. Mm-hmm. The classic saying, would probably all read or heard someone say this, that when you're eating pizza, nobody tells you anything, right? But the moment that you eat a steak or 3 eggs, everybody's criticizing the way you're eating, even your doctor.
Yes.
So I think those are the biggest changes that I've done. And finally, regarding, you were talking about exercise. Exercise, I tend to see it as a bonus, and I like to say to my patients that it should be treated more as a celebration of what your body can do rather than as a punishment. A lot of people, again, New Year's, they join a gym and think they have to run 10K and they have to do 100 push-ups when maybe they are overweight. And for them, running 10K is as if a healthy person was running 100K, right? Because you're carrying all that weight and your joints are not healthy and you haven't done exercise for a while. So it's more of a, okay, maybe for those persons as easy as just going for a light brisk walk, it is more than enough exercise. You have to start somewhere, but you have to start with a little bit of not pushing yourself. And it's a tight spot because there's a big difference between killing yourself and not doing anything, right? So when you say to some people, hey, you don't have to push yourself that hard, they take it as, I'm just going to use a treadmill and just walk super light, or maybe just I can do it. They aren't really going a little bit out of their comfort zone. I think that's the correct wording. You should train a little bit near getting out of your comfort zone. And as you progress, it's going to be harder, but you progress always. You're trying to train in that area, because the moment that you get super comfortable, you are not going to really get most of the benefits of certain exercises or certain aspects of training in a way. Of course, you can do the minimal amount, and that's great to maintain. But there comes a time, especially if you're just starting, that you have to go out of that comfort zone.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I own a Pinoe metabolic testing equipment. So it's been interesting testing clients that are, I figure out their VO2 max and their training zones based on the fuel source used and looking at breathing frequencies at each heart rate zone. And it's so interesting that people that think they're doing zone 2 or think they're doing sprint training, and they are not at all. They're just doing everything in zone 4 and zone 3 if we're doing a 5-zone protocol. And most people endurance athletes are not doing resistance training. And I want to do another show on, just because you're doing hills on a bike or running hills or swimming with water as your resistance, you still need to prioritize resistance training, especially as we age. And I focus more so now being fit and healthy as we age. And what do you find is important for people to focus on the resistance training for improving the aging process? Do you find that is a bigger area to go into as you're focused on keto gains and strength training? So what are your takes on aging athletes?
So how old are you, Debbie, if you don't mind me asking?
I somehow am 52.
Okay. Yeah. You look amazing. I'm 46. Another thing that I've changed a little bit, especially since I think last year, and on how I train is, in my case, is not go as hard as I used to. I'm 46, mostly because of joints. Because that's when you start to notice that even if you do a squat, you hear crackling where it shouldn't be or where it used to be. Doesn't mean that you cannot do, but I'm a little bit more careful. So even I've been training for what is now almost 32 years. So I've been training more than I haven't been training in my life, right?
Yeah.
Luckily, I haven't gotten any serious injury outside of maybe like a small bicep tear, and that's it. Nothing that took me out of athlete training. And what I've learned is to be careful with my training. So I use a lot of those devices that a lot of people see with heavy duty lifters, like wrist straps and things like that, right? Now, in the scope of training as we age, I do see it as mandatory. It's not optional. And a lot of people think that if you train, you're going to become a bodybuilder, or that you're a weird person. And they used to just gravitate towards cardio because all that, this idea of cardiovascular health, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And like what you were saying, a lot of people think, oh, I have to train in zone 2, or more traditionally speaking, maybe HIIT, high intensity interval training, right? Which are in about the same areas. A lot of people or clients, when I ask them about what type of training they're doing, they usually say, oh, I do HIIT. Okay, like describe the type of HIIT that you do. And they are doing 1 hour of HIIT. It's like, if you likely were doing 1 hour of HIIT, you wouldn't be doing 1 hour, right?
Yeah.
Maybe at most 20 minutes, and you would look
sure.
super jacked, because their actual intensity for you that requires for one to be in that zone,
Mm-hmm.
it's very intense. And again, only super fit people are able to do that, and for a very short while. And so usually what I suggest, again, going back to the joint issue and the energy requirements and a lot of that stuff, cardio is good, but if you want to get the best bang for your buck, I usually defer to strength training. And the caveat here is, again, when we talk about strength training, people think they have to become bodybuilders and they have to lift super heavy.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that it's lifting heavy, but in regards to your actual strength level. Mm-hmm. So maybe for me, lifting heavy, okay, maybe I'm going to be doing a big squat. But for, let's say, a lady that's 60 years old that has not exercised for a while, for her, heavy lifting means an air squat or a wall sit. And that will yield basically the same benefits. And even she's going to get more benefits from that session of strength training, from that wall sit, than for me doing a 2 or 3 plate loaded squat. Because again, it's in comparison to your actual strength level and what the muscle you have and what your training level and many other things. So it's not as it's not something big that people should be afraid of, but they should be afraid of not doing any kind of resistance exercise, because this old adagio actually stands very true. Use it or lose it, right? Mm-hmm. And the thing is that people think, okay, I used to be, a little bit big when I was in high school, but I'm okay right now. And even if I'm not gaining weight, maybe I have a little bit of flab or I have a tummy, but I'm okay, right? They don't realize that our body very much is like a savings account. What it means is, if you just have the money in the bank there's another thing called inflation. And if that money is not put to work, over time, its value goes lower. Mm-hmm. The same happens with your body. I've seen people that say they think they are fit because they weigh the same as they were in high school. Yeah. But their body looks totally different. And what is happening is, okay, these people, and it's again a very small percentage of people that are in this good scenario. And this is the good scenario. They weigh the same as when they were in high school. Let's say an average of 75 kilos, so about 167 pounds. They are small in comparison to what most people weigh today. They look maybe okay in clothes. They take their shirt off and they are skinny fat. They didn't used to be like this. What happened is that over time, and as we know, or maybe some people don't know this, but after we turn 35, we start to lose about 1 to 3 or even more % of our lean mass as we age. It's just a natural process. It's sort of called a mild sarcopenia that happens just because we aren't. First off, well, it's a complex process, because it's not just because we don't train. Because when we are younger, we maybe didn't even lift weights, but more so, it's a combination of reduced activity level with reduced or underwhelming protein intake, and also, of course, as we age, our sexual hormones tend to dwindle. So it's a combination of all these 3 factors, and maybe even more, which I may not be aware of, but these are the 3 most important. So again, one is adequate protein intake. As you know, people tend to under-eat protein, and especially now and a few years ago, because they think that protein is bad for the environment, especially animal protein, and that you may get cancer or whatever reason it's in fashion right now. So people tend to not pay much attention to protein. And if they do, they may eat some vegetarian kind of protein or vegan protein, which in some cases is not as adequate. The second is maybe they haven't actually done strength training in their life. That's the thing, okay? And as I was saying, if you don't use it, you lose it, right? And of course, the hormonal component that comes along with that. Okay, the hormonal component, to a point, there are a few things you can do, but not much unless you need and go into hormone replacement therapy. But the funny thing about this particular part is that with the correct type of food, meaning a more than adequate protein content and certain minerals, it has been found that, especially for males, you can increase your testosterone by, let's say, 200%, which I'm not saying that you're going to be on steroids, but I was reading some studies that now the average amount of testosterone for current males in the States and maybe Mexico City and I'd say civilized countries is about in between 250 to 350 nanograms, which the normal 40, 60 years ago would be double that or maybe triple that. So we tend to be now in the lower normal amounts in some cases, which again, people think it's normal to feel a certain way, which it doesn't. It is not, right? If you feel tired and depressed, and like feeling like this for 10 years is just maybe part of getting older. No, it isn't. People didn't used to feel this way.
Mm-hmm.
And then just by changing the diet, like a little bit more protein, certain minerals, zinc, boron, magnesium found in natural foods or without taking supplements. But okay, maybe you can review and add those supplements with many others. At the clients, and I've read studies and similar anecdotes of people going from those 150 to 300, 400, 500 nanograms naturally in the span of 2 or 3 months just by making dietary changes. The other factor, of course, strength training also helps increase naturally your testosterone, both for males and females. Again, because there's a hormonal response from strength training. And again, with all of these changes, you're basically reversing aging or mitigating its negative effects, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you were talking or asking about keto gains. For keto gains, I have 3 pillars. So one pillar is strength training, not just because people think I want to look good naked. That's a bonus. The main benefit on why there's strength training in keto gains is because it helps with glucose control. Basically, I'd say 80% of our clients are diabetics or pre-diabetics. People think keto gains and they think it's just for fit people that want to do keto diet. No, it's basically for overweight people. Those are our main clients, especially females that want to do a radical change in their lifestyle. So it's part of education, explaining why this approach works. But the actual things that people do is eating whole foods, high protein, low carbohydrate, but this carbohydrate comes from very healthy sources, basically mostly plants that grow above ground. We're not against plants. We're not fully carnivore. I can talk about that later, but mostly giving people the benefit of minerals and nutrients where probably you're going to get the best bioavailability. And then the strength training part, because the best way to improve your insulin sensitivity, which is basically what a lot of people don't have right now. And then if you want to eventually add more carbs to your diet, is via maintaining or adding muscle. Mm-hmm. The main reason why when we were younger, we could probably get away with eating a bag of Oreos is basically, okay, in some cases you have more muscle, but also because you have improved insulin sensitivity. And that degrades as we age, mostly because I like to say our body has a certain mileage in our organs and hormones for certain things. If you recall, diabetes was a disease that usually happened to people over 60 and also for very affluent or rich people, right? Mm. And this wasn't even like 200 years ago. It was something that was the norm, I think, in the 60s still. Children with diabetes was not a thing. Mm. It used to happen again over 40, maybe over 60, over 50. That was the time when people started to get diabetes. And now you see diabetes with children over 8 years, 6 years. If you are on your 20s, you're already pre-diabetic in most cases. in the States. I think it's about 60%, 70% of the population in the States, and correct me if I'm wrong, already pre-diabetic or on the road to becoming so in the next 2 or 3 years. And again, why is that? Because metabolic flexibility is not a thing anymore. How can you basically offset that? It's not just about exercise. It has to be the correct type of exercise, mostly geared into having adequate lean mass, and of course, using and disposing of that glucose. But with the caveat of you also have to lower that glucose intake, because there's no amount of exercise and there's no amount of muscle that you can have to a point where you can basically offset that amount of glucose, right?
Mm-hmm. So are you more keto, or is it more strategic carb timing? You know, what with your clients, if they're more metabolically unhealthy and insulin resistance, do you get them into nutritional ketosis? Is that a goal, or is different when you're working with athletes versus people that are metabolically unhealthy, I suppose?
Yeah, it really depends on the context. Like you said, usually what I suggest is if I get a client that's over, it really depends, but mostly for males over 25% body fat, which is something that people know. Say, how can I determine that? There are tests that you can do even with a tape measure to estimate, because you don't have to be exact. You just have to get probably a good estimation. And females over 30%, it's very likely that they are insulin resistant, as well as their dietary habits, what they normally eat, their level of fitness, etc. So again, I'm going by statistics, as I was saying, over 60% of the population is already on the way there. So there's a high margin that are going to be in that space, right? So in those cases, what I usually suggest, I ask them outright, are you willing to do a low carb, mostly ketogenic diet? I don't really care about the fact that they are actually showing ketones in their blood. I care more about their food choices. So usually what I suggest, depending on the person, is in between 20 to 30 grams of net carbs, with the caveat that these carbs only come from unprocessed sources and mostly vegetables that grow above ground. Mm-hmm. So that basically doesn't leave leeway to cheating and eating, keto breads and whatever, because a lot of people tend to gravitate and try to sneak a carb tortilla or things like that. And what happens is, okay, maybe their blood sugars aren't too high or low or whatever, because I don't really like people to get anxiety over those things and check. And more so also be satiated. What I see is if you're eating mostly whole food, you're going to be super satiated, and then you can even lose weight without even tracking your actual food, right? Because depending on a lot of people already living super stressful lives and then having them track macros and track this and that and weight.
Too much.
It's exactly way too much, and they end up throwing everything and not doing it.
It gets overwhelming when people track too much. I think it's just less is more is what I keep always saying to people. It's like
exactly. So my usual first step is, this is an idea for you of what your diet should look like. And you know what usually happens with that is that the main complaint that I get with people is that it's way too much food. Mm-hmm. They usually cannot finish the amount in their plates. And it's like, hey, imagine that you're in this diet where you can basically eat as much as you want, and now you're complaining that you don't want to eat, versus when you were eating about a box of cereal for breakfast and a family pizza by yourself and not feeling satisfied, right? It's like a mind-blowing effect. And maybe a lot of people think that calories count. I do think that they matter, just to be outright on this. But what I do see is that, of course, not all calories are exactly the same, and they don't function inside the same once you ingest them. That's a given, right? Yeah. So if you eat things that, again, metabolically work for you and are nourishing your body tends to reset itself, especially on those satiety levels, and you're going to be able to say no and eat just what your body needs to a point, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas, again, if you eat, and it's something that I see it myself, and I even test myself with certain foods, even a keto bread, for example, that I made myself. Usually it's a little bit harder for me to just have one bite or one
exactly
piece.
What I find.
Right?
Just it's still carbs enough to stimulate it.
It's a combination, as Rob Wolf has usually found out, that there's certain foods that make you eat more, and there's an evolutionary aspect to that, right?
Yeah, I bet.
But like if you want to, in a way, trick yourself into eating less, because there's again two sides of every issue. Like, there are some people that may be unnourished and they have to eat more. Of course, then I'm going to give them like a lot of sugar and things like that because I want them to eat. On the other spectrum, I think most people are in the side where they actually want to lose some body fat. So you have to trick yourself in a way that what you eat is more than satiating and satisfying, so that there comes a point where, oh, it's lunchtime. I'm not hungry. Well, nothing happens if you skip lunch for right now because there's no obligation for you that you actually have to eat. You're not going to, wither away if you skip a meal or going to be tired later. Like if you're eating the correct foods, doesn't happen like that. And that's also, I think, I like to say, a superpower that some people can tend to develop over time, and it's part of getting to know yourself a little bit better and really listening to your body, because there's a big difference in that movement about listening to your body when they get just a little bit anxious and they go for the bag of cereal, whereas you actually are really hungry. Like hunger, like the actual feeling of hunger is very different than a craving. Hunger is when you feel that emptiness in your stomach and you even may hear it outright making noises, right? That's very different than low sugar and anxiety hunger. Like usually that comes from carbohydrates, is like a slump, right? You feel like you have no energy, no mental clarity, and you're also imagining a chocolate bar or something sweet. It's not something that would actually be good for you. And people just go like zombies for those foods, right? I try to help them break that chain.
That's what I find with a lot of people doing fasting, is that they're not working on their relationship with food first. I was just reading posts of Dr. Mindy Pelz has amazing impact on people getting healthy by doing fasting. But then I read these comments in these groups I am in, and like, wait, shouldn't you start first with what you eat, why, and how, then the when? Start with the 12-hour fast, not just let's dive into fasting and then they just eat whatever they want when they're not eating or when they're not fasting. But I think it's really that relationship with food is important, and starting with the real food, nutrient dense food, and choosing quality. And then I think it's easier if people need to fast. But what do you find works with your clientele if for fasting, because it's such a big topic still after so many years, and then fasted exercise? I want to dive into what we talked about this 3 years ago, but fasted or fueled exercise for people who are trying to get stronger. So fasting in general, any comments on that?
I think it's great. It's basically one of those ancestral practices, again, with a caveat, right?
Yeah.
So I like to see fasting as a yin yang. And again, if you recall just the last topic where I was explaining that you learn to basically listen to your hunger and then you can skip a meal, I usually don't put fasting first. It's an optional thing that people can start when they feel they are ready. And I find that if you come from a high carb diet and you push people towards fasting, they're going to have a very hard time.
Yes.
It's like the gradual step. First, let's start with a low carb diet and especially focus on a high protein whole food. And then the fasting usually comes by itself. What happens with a lot of people is they start to skip maybe dinner or usually breakfast. Hey, you're already fasting for 8 hours or 10 without even putting any thoughts into it. And then just what I tell them, hey, do you realize that you haven't eaten for 10 hours? You're already fasting. So if you want to start to get like the usual benefits of fasting, go for 12 or maybe 16. Let's have a late breakfast, make it a brunch, and then have your traditional dinner with your family. And then they realize again, hey, I'm feeling super energized. I'm just going to have a, coffee with maybe some element or salt for, in the morning to get me through. And that's perfect. And I think that's the best way to do fasting, because also, did you know that historically a lot of civilizations and people actually did fasting, right? And it wasn't something that was shown upon or whatever. It was something that actually was usually stopped after the Industrial Revolution. So just to give you an example, like at least here in Mexico, the normal was to maybe just get some coffee or something to drink in the morning, go to work, then have lunch, and then have dinner, very much like in most Western civilizations. And then after people started to work more in cities, etc., they actually started to have breakfast, or they started to work in factories because the hours were so long. They started to have something to eat, right? The same in the States, the same in UK. I actually learned this a few years ago. They have tea, right? In UK, they usually have 3 foods plus tea. Tea is not just drinking tea as we usually think. It's actually at lunch. And that was invented because I don't recall the name of the queen that institutionalized this, but it was because she was hungry in between meals. So she basically asked for some sandwiches and tea just in between because her hair was too long, right? And because everybody wants to imitate royalty and so on, that became a thing, right? Okay. But again, a lot of things are not based on how we used to operate, but rather in customs. And of course, then industry trends and whatever, they just try to, like if we eat every 3 hours, of course, they're going to be selling more, right? And it's just, it's not about conspiracy theories or anything, but it's just like, it's an enterprise that makes money, and both the enterprise and doctors and everything else, they just move, economics move like that. They are like another being by itself. And people buy, then the trends report certain things, and then, it's something that self-perpetuates. And that's just it. But and going back to the fasting issue, again, I recommend my clients to just go fasting after they start to eat better, and then fasting naturally happens. Now, on the caveat of exercise, it really depends what kind of exercise and what amount and quality of food that you're eating, because fasted exercise by itself, it isn't bad per se, especially if you're doing a little bit of cardio in a way. There are some studies that actually show, and this is something that a lot of people, I don't know why they get angry. It's like I try to say, I'm just the messenger. You don't have to get angry at me. Even when I tell them about this or that, because they've been doing something and invested either money or time, when they find out that maybe they're not doing optimal, they get angry, right?
Yeah.
So for fasted training, like cardio fasted training, and especially on a low carb diet, people think they are going to be burning more fat by doing fasted training, right? Like if you're training fasted, you're going to be using more fat. But one thing they forget, especially in the context of people that are on a low carb diet or a ketogenic diet, is that you're already mostly burning fat. So doing fasted training to burn fat, it's very much like doing an extra kind of effort for really nothing. You're either if you're doing fat or not fat, in the end, the results in this scenario are likely going to be the same. You're already burning fat. You're you're not going to change much the equation. And in the case of people that are doing a high carb diet or paleo diet, that they're mostly burning carbohydrates to a point, doing fasted training, I don't know if you've seen this study, but what happens is, yes, you may burn a little bit more fat. And the explanation or the important differentiation here is there's a difference between using fat as an energy substrate and burning your body fat.
Yeah.
So fasted training, what it does is, yes, it increases the amount of the amount of fat used as energy, but decreases it afterwards. So let's say that you are here, you do fasted training, okay, you burn more fat, but the rest of the day you burn less. So in the end, what some studies have found out that there's no change in benefit. If you want to do fasted training, do it because you like it or because you found some mental benefit or whatever. I'm not going to negate that. Those are actually things. But for the sake of fat burning, it's more important that you take a look at your overall diet, because the benefits are not really worthwhile. There may be some benefits if you are 6% body fat and you want to go to a bodybuilding show and you're doing all the tricks that you've seen in certain studies. Okay, then do that and kill yourself with certain extreme protocols, etc., because you are going to take that 1% because that 1% really makes a difference. For the average person, if fasted training is something that you loathe and it's making it for you even more difficult to train, then you shouldn't be doing it. Because again, the net benefit is something very unsubsequential. It's not really worth it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, for actual muscle building, there's a difference.
Yeah. And sprint training too.
Yes. And in this case, what I've seen both from practice studies and clients is that overall, and especially because we're training people that are doing this to build muscle, and I'm not saying in the context of an athlete, but mostly lay persons. My main recommendation would be to not train fasted if you can. Not fasted training means having at least 25 grams of protein a few hours before you train. It doesn't have to be 30 minutes or immediately before you train or whatever. I usually suggest what I call the Keto Gains coffee before training. Let's say 30, 40 minutes, that's perfect for a lot of reasons. One reason is what I call the magic portion. It's a psychological trick, which means it's a way to get people to go to the gym because they invest in this magic portion. They take it. Oh, I already took my coffee, my pre-workout. If I don't go to train, it's going to get wasted. And it's something that I learned in a study. I've done it on myself, and it gets me to go to the gym with many clients because it becomes a ritual. You invested in this, can be the coffee or it can be a pre-workout or whatever. You already spent $5, $6 or whatever the portion costs, right?
Yeah.
And no matter what happens, it's going to make you go to the gym or do even a light session of exercise because, again, you're already psychologically invested. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
The other thing is, for me, and even after all these years, even more because I'm invested and the research shows, pre-hydration is super important and even more on strength training. Mm-hmm. So I usually suggest 1 gram, normally what I suggest of sodium before training. Again, even more important for people doing low carb because sodium is, again, what drives along with potassium, ATP energy, right?
Yeah.
So you want people to be pre-hydrated and not just with water, but actual electrolytes. So that's another thing. Of course, the classics, creatine is usually something that I also suggest. And I don't know how well versed you are with creatine, but also for older people, it's super important, especially again,
brain health.
Exactly. You're doing low carb dieting, it's super important. If you're strength training, super important. If you're over 40, again, quite important.
Well, and women too. Dr. Stacy Sims has lots of research for women really need the creatine more than men.
Exactly. And even more so if you're not, if you're even a vegan or not getting sufficient red amount of beef or whatever, likely even more important in those cases. Mm-hmm. But yeah, going back again, and the protein, because you're training, we want very much building blocks, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to build muscle and also enzymes and everything else from protein. So having those already bioavailable or floating in the mainstream of your very much blood readily available is better. Unless, of course, there's a caveat. If you had a very big lunch, maybe last night with, I don't know, maybe half a kilo of protein, maybe you don't need that protein right there because as we know, protein is basically digested in chunks. So basically you're still going to get that protein in that case, right? In those cases where people are doing maybe OMAD or fasting with adequate amount of food in their system, the fasted training doesn't really matter that much, right? But for people that are having smaller meals and even not getting adequate amount of protein, then I do think it's quite important. And again, it's part of my protocol to having a whey shake before training. Usually, if you know or you recall from sports sciences, the protein is usually suggested after.
Yeah,
I prefer to have before. You know what? The main reason? Because digestive speed of protein. So like 10 grams of whey protein or any amino acids a little bit faster are going to be digested in the span of an hour. So you can find whey if you do trace amounts in blood, and with isotopes, you're going to find aminos from the digested sources in your blood in about an hour. From other food sources, it's going to take 4, 6, whatever, depending on, of course, what they were ingested with. But aminos and whey protein, basically about an hour or a little bit less.
Or you could just take essential aminos, you're saying, just taking like 10 grams of them before a workout if you don't want to eat?
Yes, but what would be the difference between taking a shake and aminos?
Well, if you don't want to eat something, like I don't like drinking a lot of stuff in my stomach, so I'll go work out and I feel like I'm going to throw up.
Okay, but that's why I suggest more than like an hour or so.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the thing that I'm not really fond of aminos because there are a few studies that show that maybe in isolation, they actually don't, like, you know that they don't help for muscle growth, right?
Yeah.
The only thing that they do is basically they stop a little bit protein breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
That's their main benefit. And if you are pre-diabetic or diabetic, they actually seem to increase insulin resistance. So that's why I generally don't suggest aminos in isolation. Protein, some people may say it also has the same effect, but because we are strength training, you actually also are going to get the insulin spike by strength training alone. So it's basically, if you're going to get already an insulin spike, might as well get the protein around the same with the training. And the main reason also why I suggest the protein before is because I want to synchronize the insulin spike from the strength training with insulin spike, which is mild from protein.
So that was a good big question, though, right there, to push pause, that people, as I reached out a while ago, that insulin, the word, people think insulin is bad to have it released. So you don't want to eat anything that might spike insulin before a workout, as an endurance workout, because it will inhibit fat burning. But that's more, I think, for endurance exercise, zone 2 training versus I want to get stronger in the gym. My goal is to get faster, more powerful, get stronger as I age. So to enhance muscle protein synthesis and avoid being in a catabolic state, I want to build muscle, anabolic. So the solutions to enhance that process would be the role of insulin in pre-workout fuel to have fuel that will increase the release of insulin, and that will help us get muscle activation. Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, basically, a lot of pre-workouts, especially aimed for bodybuilders and, again, in general population as well, they do have carbs, and they suggest because carbs increase insulin, and insulin actually, as I was saying, doesn't actually increase muscle per se. Insulin, very much like the amino acid I was mentioning, what they do is reduce the muscle protein breakdown. So it's like an equation. Whenever you train, you do a small damage to your muscles to a point, but that's not the main mechanism as why muscles grow. But there's a thing. So you induce a little bit of muscle protein breakdown. But also, the effect of strength training creates muscle protein synthesis. So whichever is bigger after a set of strength training is the end result, right? So if you have just an adequate amount of insulin, you make the muscle protein breakdown reduce. And then having a little bit of protein around training, preferably before, you make muscle protein synthesis be higher. So you don't want to end here, like go 1 or 2 hours to the gym to end up here. It's like you worked out for no reason. And this is what happens usually if you do long-term fasting without actual protein. When again, in the sake of strength training.
Yes.
Right? If you actually want to get the best bang for your buck, you have to do this. You have to end here, not here again.
Yeah.
Let's go for here. So again, the recommendation of having a whey shake before training, it's going to increase just enough the insulin that your body produces to get those aminos inside your cells and help with the muscle building process. A few studies, and again, going back to the carbs, people thought that you needed carbohydrates to raise insulin. There are a few studies. The most notorious from Staples et al. Was, I think, in 2011. It actually shown that just 25 grams of protein actually raised insulin just at exactly the same as if you were taking it with 100 grams of glucose. Like, I'm not saying that I don't want people to understand that, hey, protein raises insulin the same. No, it just 25 grams of protein were more than enough to get the same effect needed for muscle protein synthesis as if you were eating 50 or 100 grams of glucose. More is not better. So you don't need to have all the pre-workout carbs that a lot of trainers recommend for the sake of muscle building, right? Okay, you need the protein, you need also a little bit of energy. In people that do low carb diets, you can get a little bit of MCT that also helps in a way negate the high insulin spike that some people, not everybody, might get from a protein shake, but it doesn't negate the benefit of the muscle muscle protein building synthesis. Am I making myself clear?
Yeah, got it.
Yeah. So that the actual the shake that I suggest is basically 25 grams of protein with coffee. Coffee has many more benefits than just caffeine. It actually helps to replenish glycogen synthesis faster because of not caffeine. It has to do more with many polyphenols in coffee. And again, this is very much beneficial for low carb dieters, which aren't getting glycogen from other sources. And of course, the caffeine may help some people, but you can also get the same benefits even if you use decaf, right? And then the MCT gives you 100 to 100 extra calories that are probably what some people need, right? Because this is another interesting fact. Like studies from the last 3 years have also shown that you actually don't have to bulk to gain muscle. The actual and ideal rate for gaining muscle is about 5 to 10% extra calories on your maintenance, which means that if you're overweight, you can actually gain muscle on a deficit because those calories you already have in your body fat. So you can gain a lot of muscle even if you're over 40, even eating at a slight deficit or at maintenance by adding strength training and adjusting what you eat.
It's a meal timing seems a lot of it and what to eat because the current trend seems to be more, focus on protein, fatty meat, and the more ketovore. And then adding in berries for people that are more athletic, it's berries and honey and adding some carbohydrates that are real food sources in and around the workout when you are doing a harder, more intense workout that is going to be more glycogen depleted workout and not be afraid of having those carbs at specific times to create the benefits you want from that workout to improve performance and to get faster and stronger and leaner, that people often are scared of that.
It's funny, but for example, in that camp about adding fruit as a pre-workout, I'm not really keen on that because, yeah, you get the calories, but you don't really get the glycogen. Fruit very much, as you know, fructose gets basically metabolized in the liver, so it really doesn't translate to muscle glycogen at all. At most, maybe 30%. So it's basically more of in many clients that come with that idea, it's like, no, it's a placebo, what you're getting there. Actually, in my clients, you were asking about a while ago, what approach I have with clients. And actually with new clients, it's basically, low carb. But clients that have already reached metabolic flexibility and that are leanish and they want to improve performance, I actually eventually help them reach more of a paleo diet with strategic carbs, depending on where they're going to be training. And the strategic also comes with artificial carbs in some cases, because if you actually are going to compete and you want to get a certain edge, I see no harm in adding actually glucose. Like I'm not talking 100 grams, 15 grams before training or 50, because again, we want to actually get a little bit of an edge, right? And for example, people that have clients that do trail running on keto, basically they are keto the whole week, but when we're doing the trail running, we actually we do a pre-workout, a pre-carb load a night before, and then maybe a little bit of strategic carbs during the run. But basically, it's sweet potato a day before,
Yeah.
or maybe some
Exciting.
rice if they can tolerate them. And then intra-workout, well, while they're running, because they cannot really carry that much, a little bit of the classic gels. And in those cases, it works amazingly well, even better than having other stuff, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of athletes get confused that are new to keto, that they think they need to be in nutritional ketosis. And I think, as you were saying, if you are new and you're not metabolically flexible, you don't have good fat metabolism. And I test this when I do my Pinoy metabolic testing. I've had clients that are not burning fat at rest. So then we need to look at, I like to look at people's blood chemistry panel and looking at what they're eating and when. If they're eating all the time, they're always hungry, looking at nutritional therapy signs and symptoms. Then I can help figure out, okay, maybe you need to eat more lower carb. But then if someone is a good fat burner and efficient and they're very active, and I think then it's looking at, okay, what does nutrient timing for you look like? What I've found is, let's focus on protein. As we age, I'm kind of shifted, instead of doing OMAD and doing 2 meals a day. It's like, am I hitting my protein goals? As we discussed earlier, if you listen to Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, if you try to get the 1 gram of protein per ideal pound of body weight, at least 100 grams a day, that's super challenging if you're doing 1 meal a day, especially if you only can get 30 to 50 grams at once to help stimulate muscle protein synthesis. So it's kind of what's changed in my mindset, at least, is if you are metabolically flexible, you're good at burning fat, we can, add in some nature's carbs, as like I like sweet potato we had last night, that I can take that as an athlete. Other people that are metabolically unhealthy, that will be horrible for them. So it is really individualizing the workout and fueling program based on that client, meeting them where they're at, figure out what's best for them. And I kind of got sidetracked, but nutritional ketosis, is it necessary for everybody?
I like if you recall, one of my slogans is to chase results and not ketos, right?
That's why I brought it up.
And I discovered that because for a while, especially after being a long while doing this diet, I fell into the trap of also looking at my ketone levels. And then there was a time where I wasn't really registering high ketones, but I'm not eating any carbs. My carbs come from spinach and kale. I'm eating mostly eggs. I'm not eating processed foods. So what the hell is happening? Where are these carbs, right? And what I found out after lots of studying and pinpoint with Mark Sisson, Rob Wolf, and many others that were sort of in the same vein as doing a lot of exercise in different modalities, having a low body fat, athletic physique, is certain people that have been, let's say, well adapted, are semi-metabolically or quite metabolically flexible. Ketones are a byproduct of fat burning, right? And they are mostly present when either you have high body fat or when you also eat a high fat diet. In the case that I see with, for example, in my personal case, and many clients that are in the same vein, that are already quite fit, low body fat percentage, doing mostly strength training or jiu-jitsu like Rob, or also running or trail running like Mark. Different modalities of exercise, similar physical components, low body fat, 10, 12%, a good amount of muscle, more than 10 years doing the diet. You don't produce high ketones endogenously because your body produces just enough when your body needs it. Ketosis is not an end goal. It's a byproduct of fat burning that happens sometimes if your body needs it. But our body is in a low carb state and getting the energy, because people just jump from we tend to forget that you also get energy from fatty acids. So it's carbs, fats, and ketones. Ketones are a byproduct of fat burning, but they aren't required. There are some times where you are not going to be producing ketones, and you shouldn't be chasing a high amount of ketones unless, for example, you need to be in therapeutic ketosis. Like, they feel great and whatever, but they aren't really something that you should be actively pursuing. More so, what you should be pursuing is basically your goals, your results. Are you losing weight? Do you feel great? Are you not hungry? Perfect. Then continue with what you're doing. right? Because also what I saw in this industry 8 years ago and more, and I was actually quite criticized for that, is that people were obsessed about ketones. And so what they were doing is eating copious amounts of fat to register a high amount of ketones, and then that came in detriment to their fat loss goals, right? Or maybe spending a high amount on supplements, exogenous ketones, to register a higher amount of ketones in bloods and in breath. And that's great, but what for? Just to win a numbers game? Because that doesn't really actively translate to maybe what you're reaching for. And then that created this effect of, again, people not losing weight. And where, if you recall the forums in Facebook and Reddit and whatever, 5-6 years ago, you had people like, hey, I'm registering 8 points millimoles ketones or 12, but I'm not losing weight. And the usual response was, eat more fat, eat more fat. No, it doesn't mean like that. It's calories still count. More so focus on getting protein, focus on reviewing the rest of your diet, that you're not getting sugar or maybe eating way too much of certain things. Mm-hmm. And eventually you will lose body fat, because another pitfall is people worry too much about weight, but not about your body fat percentage as a whole.
Body comp.
And this is something very useful in any female group that are related to weight loss or training or whatever. They start to train, they gain a pound or two because they're retaining retaining water from the training, and they think that training is bad because they gained a pound. No, it's like it should work like that. I have lots of pictures of clients that they weighed 140, for example, and they were skinny fat, and now they weigh 10 pounds more and they look much better and like more fit. They weigh more, right? And it's just, again, mind-blowing for a lot of people because they always correlate losing weight with weighing less on the scale. It shouldn't be like that. There's a point where you can even be gaining. And again, with a lot of clients, when they start strength training, you have to go with them and explain them and hold them by the hand. You gain 2 pounds. Perfect, because you are training. But your body fat percentage is trending down, and that's even better. Let's not really put that much more importance on the scale. It's just one of many measurements that we're going to be using, and it's just an information number. It's not like the most important thing to worry about.
Yeah, true. Well, I wanted you to explain that because I think it's an important part of what we are striving to do is to be fit and healthy, metabolically healthy, improve muscle health as we age. And being fit and active, we need to not focus on chasing numbers. And being in ketosis is just, do you feel good? Are you happy? Is your energy good? How's your sleep? And are you hitting your workout goals? And then, forget about the other stuff. I know I have a company that wanted me to coach for them, but they were just selling all these ketone drinks. I'm like, that's not, I couldn't do it. We just departed ways, but it's just like, that's not the solution to help people improve their body composition and get goals achieved. Yeah. So anyways, but I know we're short on time. So I love to share this information with people. You always have great information and insight on our community as people are into keto and carnivore and getting healthier, hopefully, and focus on muscle health. So anything else we can learn more from, and where to find you and what you're working on?
So currently I'm still on Keto Gains. I'm still giving advice. I basically try to answer every single post that people ask.
A lot.
And you can find Keto Gains in Facebook and also on Reddit. And again, if you're ready, just jump in and ask a question. And I usually try to answer nuanced answers, not just yes or no, but rather give an explanation as to why. I'm a teacher at Soul, and this is actually what made me do the things I do, learn the reasoning of certain things. And I love to go very much in depth that see why certain things may work or not, right? And I'm very open to changing my opinion if something else makes more sense and science evolves, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's what's happened the last 10, 15 years. I think listening to other people that like Mike Mutzel and Thomas DeLauer and even Brad Kearns, my friend, everyone's kind of switched like, oh, maybe we were fasting too much and not eating enough, and we're doing these type of workouts, and maybe the information out there isn't designed for us. Maybe it's people that are really metabolically unhealthy. And the people I saw on the cruise ship last week, that was a good window to see what normal people are struggling with. And those people need our help.
I think that the overall message is that sometimes it's a little bit difficult to either give easy to follow information and then not make people go into the extremes, right? Mm-hmm. Because people get lost sometimes in the details, like in fasting, right? And if you recall, I don't remember when was the last time we talked, but I really recall that I haven't been always super proponent on fasting.
Yes. So I reached out to Rob and then talked to you after that. It's like, oh, we shouldn't be fasting for cell autophagy. And so I've dug into that a lot over the last 5 years.
Yeah. And probably you found that autophagy isn't really an on-off switch, but also, and this is, I know that we're already finished, but this is important because I just recall. People think that autophagy is only turned on with fasting. And in the escape, again, of low carb diet, low carb already induces mild autophagy. Mm-hmm. Strength training, I've seen some studies that actually increases more autophagy than fasting, especially when we're talking about the first 14 hours, right? Fasting also induces autophagy via a different mechanism. Some foods as well that may be antioxidant can also induce autophagy, such as caffeine, coffee, for example. So instead of maybe fasting for 48 hours, in some cases it may be warranted. Maybe you have a medical condition and whatever, okay? Yeah. But maybe instead of fasting for 48 hours, do the classic procedure, which is strength training, stop eating so many sweets. We used all to fast for 12 or 16 hours, as I was saying, was the norm before the industrial age, right? And you don't have to fast every day. Maybe, let's say, Monday to Friday, right? Or whatever. It really depends on your schedule. If you already take care of all those things, you will realize that it's not as hard and that you can probably be productive, happy, and live a healthy and longer lifespan, right?
Yeah. Yeah, people don't want to exercise that. Well, not our listeners, but I think majority of people don't want to exercise. Everybody wants the pill, right?
Everybody
to do
wants
the job. It's like, I don't want to have to go to the gym and lift weights. It actually takes effort. So anyways, we'll talk to you soon again, and everyone can find you on Instagram and social media platforms and Reddit and learn more and ask questions, because you are amazing at keeping up to date on research and sharing what you find and going down different rabbit holes, as I keep doing.
Thank you so much, Debbie.
Thank you.
Hey, my fellow aging endurance athletes, just a reminder, if you like what you listened to today, make sure to share this episode with your community. Head to debbiepotts.net to set up a free discovery call to learn more about my personalized coaching programs, especially if you are on a mission as myself to improve the aging process and start training to be my best self when I am 80, 90 years old. So I am on a mission to live my best life and be my best self the second half of my life. So if you're on the same mission as me, head over to my website and YouTube channel to learn more ways to improve the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method.
Just a reminder to check out LMNT, Element. I love Element electrolytes. I prefer the unsweetened kind that I add into my water every day, a few times. And I think you should check it out. And use our code LowCarbAthlete for a free variety pack with your purchase. So check it out. Let me know which flavor you like best. Or maybe you're like me, who just likes it unsweetened. So check out the variety pack. Use our code LowCarbAthlete.
Thanks for listening to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at debbiepotts.net. You can help us continue and grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and see you next time.